Okay, good evening, everybody. Hope you're well. In tonight's Lightroom short, we're going to look at renaming images in Classic. And my theory of renaming, because there's a lots of things that we can do with our file or our photo names. There's a lot of information that our camera captures from date, time, location, if you have GPS, to all the EXIF information. For example, the lens, did the flash fire, what aperture we shot at, what shutter speed, ISO, white balance, all this information. And my philosophy of file naming is to give me some of that information. And this evening is not about telling you to rename your files in a particular way, but to just perhaps open your eyes a little bit in, well, you could actually do this and you might tweak the philosophy or the idea or the concept of, oh, actually, I always want that piece of information, or that information could be handy to me to make a decision. So before I jump into Classic, a lot of cameras allow you to partly or fully customize the file naming in camera. So normally you have two formats, and you can customize it to a part. So what I do is, and some of you will already know this, is I actually, as a part of my file naming structure in camera, I identify the camera. And I'll explain that why, and you'll see why in Classic. So I've already got the initials of the camera in my file naming structure. Okay. So let me share my screen. Okay, I've got a collection here with several images in them, and they're all different cameras and phones, but they are the default file name in the camera. Okay, so this is of one of my photo club events in Lynmouth, and you can see it's IMG 3256. It's a HIC file, and it's been taken with an iPhone. And how you get that information is you press I for information, and you can customize this information. So you can set, in this case, I have it set as shutter speed, lens, ISO, what was the lens settings, and then I have date and time and the pixel count. But you can customize all this. So this is why I feel that having a custom file name that's relevant to yourself as a photographer, just by pressing the letter I on your keyboard, and you can cycle through it. There's three presentations, no information at all. First cycle, second cycle. You can have information in this file name that can be relevant to the image or to you, or tells you something. And that speeds up your workflow, because you haven't got to come over to metadata, change it to EXIF and so on. That's 4 transactions, that's 4 actions. And if you've got to do that on a lot of images, that can take some time. So I can just cycle through these images. And if I've got information in my file name, I can just see the information, what I want to know. Could be location, could be date, could be time, could be who's the customer, who's the what bride and groom, what type of bird are they, etc. And you can automate this. So file name, first way to do it. I've got an active image here. And if we come over to the metadata into EXIF, under metadata, we have got the file name, and I can type in anything I want there. So I can type in iPhone underscore. And now if I double click on the image, it's changed the file name. But it's changed it in the operating system. So I will now just come down to, let's find it, Show in Finder. And there you can see it's actually changed it in the file naming structure in the operating system. So Classic is talking to Mac and changing the file name in Mac. Now, you can, when you import your images, you can tell Classic to reset to the original file name, and there's a preset. Okay, so now it's now reverted back to the original file name. So when you import them, the catalog records that original file name. So if you changed it, you can always revert back, just simple as that. So that's the first way. We can just click in the box, but that's very labor intensive because you go through the first one, the second one, and so on. But there are templates. So how do we find the templates? We go up to Library and we come down to Rename Photo, or we can press F2 on the keyboard if we have a function keyboard. And we have these file templates. Okay, so let's have a look at a template to start with. I'm just going to click Edit. And what we do is these presets. In this box, we can put any information we'd like. And these are EXIF data fields, and I'll go through them in a second. But we put in information, and it's a free text box. So we can type in Exmore, and it's not case sensitive. You can put it lower, uppercase. I can put in ASCII characters, so I've got an underscore in there. And I can now select information from the image. So I've got file name, I've got suffix, I've got folder name, I've got original file name. So I just click there, original file name. So now if I renamed this, this would have Exmore underscore IMG underscore 3256. But this would have this as a preset. So let's say I was a wedding photographer. You might want to put Smith and Jones and the original file name. And that would rename this image and all the images, because this is a template, as Smith and Jones underscore original file name. But there might be other things that you'd want to do. So for example, Smith and Jones, and you might want to put the year in there. Okay, so we go up to year. So Smith and Jones in the year underscore original file name. So let's save this. So I come up to the top, save as a new preset, Smith and Jones year. Okay, I've created that preset, press done. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all these files and I'm going to rename them all. So I'll go Library, rename, Smith and Jones, and here we go. And now we've got Smith and Jones 2018, the original file name. Come off to the next one. This shot was 2022, again 2020, 2021, and I just go through them all, and you see they're all renamed. Simple as that. But it gives me this information. And this information very, very quickly can inform me. So I could have a collection, because I always work in collections of images, and I could decide on an image, or I might be looking for an image. Okay, and now to change those, nice and simple, rename images, go back to the original file name. And there we go, I've reverted back to the original file name just by using that template. Now, what I do in my main catalog, and some of you will know this, is I have a template with a lot of information in there. Now, to me, a photograph is a moment in time. It's something that you cannot replicate. So I treat my file naming structure as that. So I have here a formula. Now, because I'm a portfolio photographer, what that means is sometimes I'm employed by organizations, so they own the copyright. And I need to identify who the copyright holder is of that image. I may have a license to use the image, perhaps in my portfolio or something like that, but the customer owns the copyright. That's very rare, but there are 2 customers that I have that I do that with. All other times, I own the copyright. So as a part of my workflow, I have my initials. Okay, that tells me who the copyright holder is. And because a photograph to me is a moment in time, I now start using calendars and times. So I now put the date in, so the year to start with, and you can select different ways of putting it in. So I could select year, month, and day. So I can take out the first one that I dropped in, which was just year. So it's going to give me MSP 2020 1010. So this was taken on the 10th of October 2020, and my initials are at the front. So I own the copyright and the date it was taken. And then I'm going to put an underscore. The reason why I put an underscore is I'm going to separate it for more information. So now I want to put the time in. What time was it taken? So I'm going to go hours. So it's going to put hours in. And then I'm going to put minutes in. So you can see it's building up, 8:22, this was taken. And because cameras can take multiple frames per second, I'm going to put seconds in. And then to go one step further, because a D3, a D4, D5, Nikon, or an R1, Canon, R5, R6, they can take 120 frames a second. I'm going to put the original file name in there. So now when I look at this example up here, it's giving me initials, date, time, and the original file name. Why do I put the original file name in there? Because I've got shutter actuation. This is the 4,496 image that I've taken with this camera. So to rename this image, I go there. I then zoom up. We can now see I own the copyright. This is the date. This is the time. And there is the original shutter actuation number from the camera. If I actually go to one of my cameras, here it is. This is how I rename in camera. So I've got NZ53753. Nikon Z5. That was the camera that it was taken with. And its shutter actuation number, 3,752. So I now go to my library. I can do it this way. So I go to renaming. I select the preset and I could press OK. Or I could come over to the file naming like before where I typed it in, select it here and select the drop down that I want. And there we go. So now I've got who owns the copyright, the date it was taken, the time it was taken. So it was taken at 3:46 in the afternoon, 14 seconds, and the shutter actuation. Now, if this was a picture of a bird flying through the scene, I would have probably the same time. But this shutter actuation number would increase. So it'd be 53, 54, 55, 56. But it would be the same time because these mirrorless cameras can take 120 frames a second. Okay. But this gives me a lot of information here. So what else can I do? Well, if I come down to file renaming again, and I look at the template, so I'll come down, select it. I've got this custom text at the bottom, and I can insert custom text. Now, what that will do is every time I rename an image, it'll ask me to type in some custom text. So there might be a particular something bespoke about this image, and it'll ask me to type that in. Okay, so this is custom text down the bottom. But the other thing I suggest to people is to think about exporting. So we've got Smith and Jones and date and the original file name. But Smith and Jones is a wedding. It's a bride and groom. And they've bought a package. And the package is, let's say, 100 images. Now, if you gave them this file name, you've got 3,752. But the next image you might give them might be 64. And the image after that might be 82. And the image after that might be 91. So you're missing lots out. Now, that would say to me, well, where's all the other missing photographs? You've given me 60 images or 100 images, what I paid for, but the numbers say you took 1,000 images. I want to see the other images. So you're digging yourself a little hole. What you can do is you can select image numbering. So I'm going to start at 1. So now I'm going to update this preset and press done. So now I'm going to go select all these images, file, export, and on export, I'm going to rename them for that preset. I'm going to put them in a little folder to find them quickly. And I'm going to open the Finder, don't put a watermark. Okay, so it's going to take these 17 files, it's going to export them. And as you can see, it says Smith and Jones 001, 002, 003, 004, 005, and so on. So the customer doesn't see any gaps in the numbering, but it's done that automatically. And you can see, if I go back to the original image, this original image hasn't changed its number structure. Okay, it's still the original. There's the exported one. There's the original file name. And you could do this the same with exporting them, and you had a preset for export. So you might have a preset that creates a print. So let's go height and width, 300. We put in there inches. There we go, 10 inch by 8 inch. And this is where you would use the custom text, because you're going to export it 8 by 10. When it goes to the export, you type in at the end 8 by 10 print, because you're now asking it to make it an 8 by 10 print. So there's lots of options you can do with file renaming. Once you've exported them and you've sent them to your client, you can just delete these because you can remake them later. One last thing. If you hand off your image to Photoshop, you can come to Preferences, External Editing, and down here, we've got a file renaming for handing it off to Photoshop. Why would you do that? Well, again, it's identifying that you've taken it to Photoshop. So let's open Photoshop. And now I'm going to go Command E, take this into Photoshop. There we are in Photoshop. Now, if I save this, it's going to save it as a PSD. There we go. And it's got E0090. So if I go back to Classic, there we go. It's a Photoshop file. E0090. It's telling me that I've externally edited this image, and I know it's Photoshop. PSD is Photoshop, but it could be TIFF. So the E is telling me this is my 90th external edit from Lightroom Classic. So there's lots of things that we can do. There's also one more before we go. Email a photograph. Down the bottom here, we've got some presets, and you can file rename them in the presets. So I'm now going to email this photograph to somebody, a particular size, with a new file name. And you can do that without exporting it and adding it to your email client. You can do that all within Lightroom Classic. So there we go. There's some tips about file renaming. Anybody, any questions? Pretty quiet tonight. Go on, Callum, you must have a question. You always have a question.
Well, more just cogitating. I was thinking if every time you took a job, you had like the invoice number or something for the client, then before you started, you could start, or in the camera, you could tell it that you want all the photographs to start with that invoice number. And then you'd have the shutter number just appended to the end or something like that. So that would help with track as well.
Yeah, purchase order number or something like that. Yeah, totally. You know, it's not for me to tell you this is what you got to do. It's to provoke you to think, oh, I could exactly like that. I could use it for this and I could use it for that. So let's say you filed your images or renamed your images in the narrative. Yeah, your background, San Francisco. So you had San Francisco as the first part of your file name. That's totally fine. Or you might say, right, all my images, I will, when I export them, I've got San Francisco in them. Now, something that I do is, especially if I'm supporting an organization and I'm donating a bit of my time or a bit of my knowledge, I will put my name in the file name. So it'll have, well, I've just been to Lundy for a few weeks, the islands, the end of the Bristol Channel, and I took a couple of pictures and I sent them into them and said, look, use them if you want to use them. And it had the narrative in the file name, hyphen, copyright, and my name. Actually, in the file name itself, on the email, was that information. So Tibbets was the property, and it had hyphen, copyright, my name. And then I took one of the church, some to Helen's church, I think it is, St. Helen's, hyphen, copyright, my name. So there's no excuse that they don't know who owns the image. And you can do that on export. So if you're sending something to a club, or you're entering a photo competition in a club, you can put your name on the file name. So there's no, when there's 30 or 40 people entering pictures by email, etc., you put your name in the file name. So there's no misunderstanding. And you can just have a template for that. So there's no, it's not one box. It's a variable. You can do all these different things. And it's up to you to choose, oh, I could use that, I could do this. But for me, a photograph is a moment in time. And the reason why I have that philosophy, as David will know, is you don't get duplicate images. Have I imported them? Haven't I imported them? Well, one of the things straight away was it's time and date. You can't duplicate time and date. So I know immediately if that's a duplicated file because Classic will put -2, -3, -4 if they're duplicates. So I know immediately that they're duplicate files. I've made a mistake somewhere. And this is what Monday nights is all about. It's passing on experiences and knowledges and getting people to think about what we do. Okay. So anybody else got any questions about file renaming? No? Okay, so next week it's something specific for Nikon users. We're going to look at Lightroom in comparison with picture profiles or picture styles and how we can shoot with Nikon cameras with picture styles, preserving the picture style and keeping the option open of using that picture style. So for people that don't know what picture styles are, you can create a image style, like for example, a film style, Tri-X, T-Max, Provia, Velvia. You can build a recipe in camera. Canon do the same thing, Sony do the same thing, where you can change your contrast, you can change your saturation, you can change your sharpness. So it looks like a particular style of film, or I could make my Nikon cameras look like the Fuji colors, and I can change the style, or I can change the black and white. And what you can do with digital cameras is you can actually embed it into the raw file and create a JPEG. Now, if you embed it into the raw file, you have to use the manufacturer's software to read it. So I've been playing with, well, how can I take a photograph in, let's say, T-Max, so that was a black and white, 1980s black and white, or Kodachrome in that vivid color scheme, and preserve that in the raw format, but use Lightroom and process it. So I've now worked out a way that I can import and preserve the picture style and keep my options open in Lightroom. So that's what we're going to look at next Wednesday. Picture styles and how to use them with Nikon. And if you're not a Nikon user, you can take the concepts away and say, how can I modify those for Canon? So now, why would I want to do that? Well, my philosophy is, well, if I can actually get my processing to 95% in camera, I can just sit there with my iPad mini over a cup of coffee, quickly do the last little couple of bits of edit and send them to Instagram. So I'm not spending hours in front of this computer doing that.
I certainly do that with the Sony when you can set the picture profile and it will show you it won't change the raw file, but it will show you the effect on the back screen, because that's with your JPEG, isn't it? So if you
Yes.
set it to black and white, you're looking at a black and white image on the back of the viewfinder.
So I've worked a workflow out using some of the Nikon software that keeps my options open all the way through the workflow of importing and then asking that question, do I want to do it what I would call my traditional Lightroom workflow? That's fine, I can take it that way. Or do I, even a few months later, want to use the picture style and edit it, and then take that edit and put that into Lightroom? So I'm keeping my options totally open. as we discussed a few Mondays ago, somebody said to me, "Oh, why don't you process those images that you took of that war landscape as it was presented in 1914, which was sepia, all those brown colours?" And I'd never thought of it like that. I thought of it of the narrative and the message that I was saying today, not as the presentation of 1914. So this landscape, this is what it looks like today, but I'm presenting it as it was in 1914 as a photographic style. Well, I want to keep those options open, so I go out for some street photography. I'm shooting in black and white. I see the image in black and white in my viewfinder, but perhaps 3 months later, I want to process it in color. And I want to preserve that flexibility. And I've worked out a workflow to do that. So, and whilst I'm out in Bath doing some street photography, if I want to pick up my iPad and I want to share an image in that black and white style, I can do that within nanoseconds. I can just either take my card out, plug it into a reader, into my iPad, or Bluetooth or Wi-Fi it. So we're going to look at that next Wednesday. Going to give you a brief overview of that. Okay. Any questions about renaming? No? Okay. So this will be up on YouTube on Friday if you want to see this under Lightroom Mark. And next week we're doing, as I say, the profiles. And for those I see on Monday evening for our Lightroom support community, we're continuing on the conversation of color adjustments. And we're going to be looking at the color picker. We looked at hue, saturation, luminance. We're going to look at color picker globally. Okay.
Thank
Have a nice evening, everybody. Lovely to see you.
Lovely,
Take care.
thank you.
Bye.
Bye, David. Take care. Bye.